Because even if you don't have a religious upbringing, putting yourself out there at all, like literally to bear all while talking about the news and everything else, it's like ballsy as
I know.
Like I have so much. I'm just going on social media. My clothes are always on.
Yeah.
So far, maybe we'll do a
naked episode.
Yeah, we'll do a naked episode.
Let's do it now.
Am I in a movie? I mean, this episode all goes.
As a fundamentalist Mormon, having 5 parents and 44 brothers and sisters was the norm for Calvin Wayman.
Today I'll be spending a day with Calvin, an ex-cult member.
Calvin is on his shit. The thing I love about the show is just even in the name, culture, emphasis on the word cult.
I have friends who grew up in like real cults. We had somebody on the show who has 44 siblings and 4 moms because he grew up in a polygamous compound. When I look at that, I'm like, okay, that's a cult.
And it's not just going to be heavy all the time.
You had more siblings than there were presidents for a while.
Holy shit. You're right.
We're going to have a bunch of guests on the show. I'm into creativity, comedy, entertainment. I want this podcast to be the creative expression for my story and for my perspectives on life.
Oh my God!
Nice to see you.
Boom.
It's been a while. By the way, we're on, so I'm a fan of the cold start, so we've started the podcast.
Love it. I love
already.
that.
So we've been talking offline a little bit, and Nora asked me when she got here. Nora's off screen, my assistant. So she's like, so how did you and Laura meet? So maybe I'll say that. So I got to share the whole story. So
Please.
I'm in New York City. My girlfriend at the time is like, there's this museum called the Museum of Sex. You got to go to this. And I was like, okay. So I'm like in a new city for the first time. This was a year ago. And that's fun. You've been?
Oh my God, I work with them a lot.
Ah.
I love that place. They've got a new one in Miami opening as well. They're a very exciting institution.
I mean, you have coming from a cult where sex is so either silenced or shamed. Like it was just it was like freedom for my soul to be in there. But I go from that to then we learned from somebody in there that there was this dungeon. And my girlfriend at the time was like, can we please go to that? And I'm like, if we're just going to go to watch, let's go to the dungeon. Okay. So we go to this dungeon. That was fun. That expanded my mind. It was very, just a lot of different scenes, non-penetrative, just a fun dungeon in New York City. And then somebody in there told me about this place called NSFW.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what you don't know. So the night we met at NSFW, the theme of the night was called Send Noobs. I'm a noob.
A noob. A total beginner.
Total beginner to this. And I'm like, I'm walking into this place thinking that this is going to be like a dinner.
Oh, no, you did not think that.
I did. I went to a meetup once. I went to a meetup for this type of thing. I went to a poly meetup and they did what they call munches. And munches is just people in like the poly or the sex lifestyle or whatever, just conversation and stuff. And I'm like, they're not going to take a new person. Now, here's the thing I've learned since then. These other events I've been to were like in Utah or Arizona, not in New York City.
New York's
New York
different.
City doesn't fuck around.
That's
they just
right.
jump in. So I go into this place thinking it's just going to be some sort of orientation. I walk in, people are playing the Jenga game, and your tits are hanging out.
Yeah.
And everybody's in there, and other people that are both all part of Naked News. I can't explain, like, as an ex-cult kid walking into a scene like this, is like, am I in a movie? This is wild. And then the thing I love the most is by the end of the night, it was just so normal. It was just humans being free, having fun, having conversation. Somebody that like she gets in the middle and we like draw her and everything. Right?
Everything that you're saying right here is like the perfect public service announcement for why we need to embrace sexuality. Also why we need to come to New York City and come to NSFW. But my God, there is a very sincere joy coming off of you as you recount this.
That's why I wanted to bring you on and talk about this because, again, I think sex is way too weird. First of all,
way too weird.
It's made way too weird.
Is that a bad thing?
No.
I love it.
That's the thing, is it's made to be this thing that we can't talk about.
I see.
So I grew up in polygamy. I have 44 siblings.
Wow.
So sex happened a lot.
Right.
It must have.
Yeah.
And yet, how many conversations have I ever had about sex with any of my parents? Precisely zero.
Right.
How many times did I hear it even talked about in church or community settings? Precisely zero. Right. And so I just think it's this strange thing. So I'm excited. I don't know where we're going to go.
No, I love all of this because, my goodness, your journey alone, I'm not making this all about you. I'm the guest here today. But your journey alone, I think, is so necessary to share with folks, because you don't have to come from a cult to feel like you've had no education, no experience, and no acceptance around sexuality. I think that that's actually a very real societal problem, even in our modern world today.
Yes.
It's just not made normal or comfortable or even reasonable to go to these places, whether it's in conversation or whether it's to seek it out independently. And what resources do we have? We're seeing websites being taken down. It's hard to find reliable, factual, compassionate education. So we're kind of left to just go our own way and maybe fall into the right conversation that gives us that healthy understanding and celebration of our sexual selves. But
Yes.
I mean, you got to be in the right place to find that.
Yeah. And what I've learned in the last couple of years is that it's incredibly, it was such a surprise. And then it's like obvious when you start living, but the surprise is this is something that everybody's either engaged in or they're thinking about it. It's just not something that we should be making strange or like weird, and we should talk about it. And so going back to something we were talking about off air, I think is also important, is because we're going to get in conversations, and there are some people that might say, well, I'm monogamous, and so there's no, like, why would I listen to somebody that's like a sex worker or in a space that, like, I could never see myself there. And something that I've been telling friends, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. There is so much to learn from people that are so open in their sexuality and in these types of safe sex spaces. One of those things is communication. Everybody says in relationships, communication is the most important thing.
But do they practice that?
Yeah. No, exactly.
Right?
I have never seen the level of communication that is done in these types of dungeon spaces, sex spaces, like
sex-positive spaces.
Sex-positive spaces.
Right.
And that's what I think even monogamous people can learn something from that.
100%. Just because you have, agreed to be in a monogamous relationship, that doesn't mean that you also need to take this vow of silence between each other. Like, you're never going to talk about your needs, your wants, or maybe the changes that you experience as a human being with desires, because we do change. Experiences in life changes us. Age changes us. And so it's natural that these details of our sexual selves, they evolve as we grow. And just because you're with somebody and you met them a certain way, and when the two of you got together, this is how you had sex. Am I allowed to swear on this?
Fuck yeah.
This is how you fucked. This is how you made each other feel good. It's not going to stay that way.
Yeah.
So there's just not this, there isn't an encouragement to have the check-ins as often in, say, a monogamous relationship, because you've established this is what we're going to be. We're monogamous. Boom. That's where it ends.
And the what's blown my mind is the level of that, where there is silence. People are in a relationship for a year, 2 years, 5 years,
lifetimes.
And I've talked to people, and they're complaining about their partner, and they're complaining about something not working. Maybe they've been together for like a couple of years, and I'm like, what did he say when you said that, or what did she say when you said that?
And they haven't talked about it.
Yeah,
right. But this silence builds resentment is the thing. That's what happens is you begin to resent your partner, and you go, they don't understand me. They don't know how to make me feel good anymore. They don't know how to pleasure me. They don't even give a shit anymore. And the issue is that you yourself, you are responsible to communicate these things. So if you're not doing that, you can't really blame the other person for not being able to read your mind.
So you may not agree with this, but you made me think of what I call one of my unpopular beliefs in relationships. But you said a key word. So my unpopular opinion so far in relationships is I don't necessarily believe in compromise. Now, I'll continue. So what do you replace compromise with? Win-win. Like, talk it out and find where it's a win on both sides. Because in my opinion, if you're
takes a lot of effort. It means you're going to have to negotiate a little.
You're going to have to negotiate.
Right?
You're going to have to be open with what your wants and needs are. But this is why I don't like, this is a kind of a tangent, but now we're just talking about communication. If it's compromised, somebody's losing a little. And if you do that too much, you have to keep score. And that's
where
a
the
losing
imbalance
can lean to resentment.
That's right.
So that's why
I agree with that. I think the word compromise itself, there's a winner and there's a loser. And so when you set it up that way, you're like, oh, well, how much am I losing? Or do I feel okay with how much I asked for? That's the other side of it, is that, you know, when you are taking a stand for yourself and you're saying, I don't tolerate this, or this is what I need, and you're trying to communicate that, sometimes we doubt. I mean, I'm speaking from my own experience. I know that maybe it's because I'm a Canadian, maybe it's because I grew up in a very complex and traumatic household. Maybe it's like all of these things. I go, am I asking for too much? Well, maybe I'll put my needs aside and I'll just continue to endure. I'll continue to suffer with whatever the current circumstance of the relationship is. And that's where, again, it gets dangerous. You have to be so in touch with what it is you truly want, the things that truly bring you pleasure and make you happy, whether it is, you know, the love side of the relationship or whether it is the sex side of the relationship. If you don't have an inventory of what these items are, how on earth do you begin to get them?
be willing to explore it, and then be willing to not make it wrong when you find that that's something that you need.
Yeah.
Because I
an
think
acceptance of it.
Growing up in a super religious environment, for me, that was a big thing, is like, I think I'm really needing sex to feel healthy and to feel good.
Well, yeah,
it's
part of a healthy lifestyle.
Yes.
No, it's part of the base needs.
It's like, talk about mental health. Like, I go down a checklist. If I'm ever feeling low, I'm like, okay, Calvin, are you working out?
Yeah.
Okay, work out, move your body. Are you eating well? Okay. Are you getting your sleep? Okay. Are you having sex? Like,
or self-pleasure.
Exactly.
Self-pleasuring. That can be a great
100%.
Yeah,
Are you getting the things that you need that make you
But we do not want to acknowledge that in or parts of our modern society don't want to acknowledge it, because I know there's a great community of us here in New York that definitely prioritize this. But the idea that sexual needs, even sexual desires, they don't have to be needs. They can simply be desires. This is part of our instinctual humanity. We can try and silence it. We can try and pacify it. We can try to do everything possible to distract our mind from going there. But it is part of our DNA to be driven towards pleasure. So the more you deny that, think about what you're doing to yourself. You're automatically setting up for frustration within your sense of identity.
Yeah, you're cutting off parts of yourself.
Yeah.
I want to time travel a little bit back to your childhood, but before that, one point I wanted to make is, one thing I've loved about exploring people and cultures and even this space of positive sex spaces is I am fascinated at the diversity of desires.
Oh, yes.
There's so many, like, coming where I come from, there's one way. There's missionary, there's like, you have husband, wife, that's it, or whatever. But what I love is there is no one way. Like, whatever kind of desire you have, you can find a way to explore that safely. And I can only imagine, and that's me just being.
I love that you're so giddy about it.
It's fascinating.
It's very refreshing.
Yeah,
it's very refreshing. I mean, I've been in this liberated state for quite some time now, but it is so refreshing to hear this, that you're taking note of just all of these beautiful discoveries along the way. And of course, what you're talking about when it comes to sex positions, I mean, you're talking about what's possible in the physical realm, but then you also have to factor in the mental imagining and fantasy exploration, because that's another thing. Not every fantasy we have or conjurer of sexual arousal needs to be a physical experience.
Totally.
Once you permit yourself the opportunity to go into the fantasizing, then you are truly liberated beyond. You have to, in your own mind, say, yeah, it's safe to think like this because I'm allowed to be a human being that wants to feel arousal and conjure it for myself.
And you just triggered a rant.
Please.
sometimes I'll watch TikTok or Instagram, and I will jump on these podcasts, and there'll be men talking, saying, "This is how women are," or even women saying, "This is what men want," and stuff like that. And I'm like, but are we talking about Laura or Michelle or Susan or Amanda or Calvin or Dave? Yeah. Like, it's so varied.
It's not a one size fits all.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to what does stimulate us. It's
that's
not
stimulation.
a one size.
That's relationship.
Yeah.
That's what you're into. That's
Yeah.
what you want. Like there's words that we have around this space, like dom, submissive, those sorts of things. And it's there's such a wide spectrum. It's just like a fine wine. Like there's different. What's the word in wine? There's different notes. Yes. We're on the same wavelength, Laura.
Different notes.
Yeah, there's different notes to relationships, to love, to sexuality, to pleasure, and that's a beautiful thing. Okay, I'm curious to know what made you. So how'd you got here? So let's just flashback to, like, how were you raised? Like, how were you, like, where did you come from?
Yeah, no, I love telling this because, again, it's one of those things where there's a lot of different notes. I'm originally from Toronto. I'm an identical twin. So there's two of us.
Does she have long hair?
She does. She's the complete opposite, right? Like, we satisfy both extreme. And it's fun because I get to see what I would look like if we're identical. So we always are able to check in with.
I love identical twins because of that right there.
Yeah.
Because you're identical, but you're not.
No, the identities have definitely taken form after, 34 years of being on this planet. But we grew up in Toronto, the two of us, and mom and dad. At about 5 years old, my mother got diagnosed with breast cancer, which is hard in any family situation. I mean, there's only so much you can communicate to the kids. There's only so much expectation you can set for what they're about to experience. So most of my childhood from 5 to 10, she ultimately passed when I was 10, but a lot of hospitals, a lot of performative, we are okay with what's happening in this house because
performatively okay, not actually feeling the.
Well, no one in the family was really coming forth with their grief or their struggle, and it was a strange agreement we all made with each other. No one spoke about, hey, we're not going to cry. My sister and I did, but we were very committed to making sure everything was okay and that we were an invincible family of 3 once she passed. So my father raising 2 10-year-old twin girls. He continued to work his full-time job in radio programming, and my sister and I became more like friends to my father. I remember there was very much a friend kind of dynamic. I mean, we spent so much time together locked into what my father called the little family, which was this very committed family unit. Everyone is at the dinner table every single night. It was almost like we all had to agree to sticking together in the tightest bond possible. And so not only am I growing up in this dynamic fearing that if I do want to seek out my independence, I'm going to hurt them, but I'm also in a twinship. So inevitably, anyone in a twinship, once you start saying, I'm going to seek out my own individual identity, you end up, it's not an offense that I made to my twin sister, but I knew that it was a heartbreak for her. And she's still to this day.
Start living your own.
That's right.
Interesting.
Because your identity is that of the twins, of 2 people together. And so we were these twin girls that went through a very painful upbringing. And I was the first one, I'm a minute older, but I was the first one to start seeking out a different friend group, to start dating, to start exploring myself sexually, to then lose my virginity, to then I was the twin to do all of those things. And, to this day, my sister, who is my best friend forever, to this day, she still says, well, that was the hardest time in her life. And I said, but we lost a mother together. Wouldn't that be the hardest time in your life? And she says, no, it was when I started realizing that you were departing from our shared identity. So I couldn't stop it. It's part of growing up. We watched a lot of movies in my family. So we didn't necessarily have conversations about growing up and what it means to start pursuing relationships or what it means to start having desires and pursuit of pleasure. But we watched movies that tackled a lot of this subject matter.
That made you... By the way, how were you raised religiously?
Oh, nothing. Both of my parents were raised extremely Catholic. And so they raised us to be free spirit, independence, choose your own path.
That's refreshing.
Yeah.
So you
I know I'm lucky.
Yeah. Can't say I had that.
I know that it is a privilege that might be controversial, because I know for some folks religion really is what keeps them motivated and keeps them inspired in life. And if that is the entirety of your relationship to religion, I say go forth. But
one thing I will say, and then I want to go right back to your like discoveries and stuff just on this point, is people talk about their hardships becoming something that they end up becoming grateful for.
Yeah.
And I used to think that was bullshit. Like whatever, like growing up in a cult, I was so mad when I first found out, like 5 years ago, like I went through this whole thing, like, what? Why would, if there's a God in the universe, how crazy,
right?
Like, because it's so against my soul and DNA to like be controlled and like, and then made feel bad by having any decisions. I was so mad.
You may have that anger in you for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Because my goodness, that's a huge weight to bear when you start questioning those things. So,
but earlier, it's, I keep getting this more like you notice something in me of like, it's so cool to see.
I'm investigating.
The fresh eyes view.
Yeah.
I fucking have that 24/7 walking around New York City.
Oh, no shit.
And so
so do I.
And so, yeah, most people do. And so I getting to this strange place within especially the last 5 months since actually locking in my apartment here, this strange place where I'm like, I'm kind of glad I grew up in a cult. Like that's a strange thing to say, but I kind of am, because that going from that shelter to then something, riding in a fucking airplane and looking out on the clouds feels magical to me. And
okay, because you've got a very healthy perspective of it. Can you imagine how many people would feel overwhelmed, inadequate, and fucking lost? You see the excitement in it.
Yeah.
And that is power to you. Yeah. But I can only imagine, because it's not my life, how many individuals like yourself that are making a massive life change that would feel so entirely lost.
And I've had that too.
I'm sure. You know what? Yeah. How dare I say you haven't?
No. So I was just bringing the nuance to where there can be silver lining in this shit. Because there's nothing more difficult than leaving everything you've ever known and your entire reality being altered in like a single decision. Like 99% of the people that you know become estranged overnight. Like it was bananas.
God, I love steering us into the darkness.
I do too.
I really do.
We're going to end on the deep end.
I'm sure we will.
I'm trying this thing.
I'm sure we
where
will.
It's like end on the deep end. Ooh. So we'll try to end super deep.
But only if I can come up for that big gasp at the top.
Okay.
Right.
Deal.
I will have a gasp.
Okay. Going back to so you're now starting to explore. So you and your twin ship, by the way. I've never heard that term.
Twin ship, yeah. It's a twin
ship. You're
ship.
in a twin ship.
I'm in a twin ship, and it's a blessing and a curse. But as you seek out your own identity, I mean, it's the most exciting feeling in the world, because you're finally realizing your wholeness as a single individual human.
Yeah.
And I was getting a breath of fresh air, leaving, it's not a cult, but we all agreed.
That's kind of where I was going.
I
think that's what made me think of this is like I see where you're going.
Yes.
And yeah, it was very stark.
I'm departing from this. So it was a survival method that we had, because it was hard and because we were destroyed by this grief. So I'm taking a stance to get away from this environment that I don't feel is entirely honest, nor do I find it welcoming of my emotions, because I did have temper tantrums as a child, and I did have enormous explosions of anger or sadness, whatever it was. And it was met with, come on, Laura, you're more mature and we don't do that. We don't do that. You're more mature than that. You're 6 feet tall. You're more mature. We watch incredible movies. And I sound like I'm really coming down on my father, and I'm not. He's actually introduced me to so much of what makes my world wonderful. But there wasn't room to be explosive and messy and emotional and full of grief. And so as I seek out onto my path of individuality, and I begin finding relationships with other people, love relationships, sexual relationships. Suddenly, I'm having sex. And as my body is beginning to hit that roller coaster uptick towards climax, I realize, oh no, I can't maintain composure. I can't maintain Laura the Invincible, I survived the death of a mother. I can't. In order to reach that pleasure, I have to fall apart.
Go. Yeah.
And I have to, sometimes a tear or multiples come out. And that to me is when I started valuing sex and sexuality, because I realized it was the first place in my life that I could bring my authenticity, including my mess, including my emotions, into it. And I wasn't rejected. I was embraced. In fact, it made the experience more intense and beautiful and meaningful. And so that's why sex is the level of value that I have for it today, because it's the first place.
You just reminded me of a conversation I had with my friend the day after I left NSFW.
Yeah.
They were like, how would you describe it in one sentence? And I was like, it was so real and human. And that's what you're describing to me, is that you were able to find authenticity through the journey.
Yeah, of course. You can still have great sex when you're playing a role, when you're in there kind of wanting to blow someone's, of course.
But even playing a role can be a form of authenticity if that's like a genuine part of you that you're like, I want to explore that, similar to what you're saying.
It doesn't mean it's dishonest.
Exactly. It can be honesty. It can be like, I'm just like you're talking about, I feel like I need to explode or cry.
Yeah.
You're like, this is a role I want to play into and see what it feels like.
In order to attain that grand release of orgasm, the most incredible electricity that can course through our body, you can't be faking it.
Thank you, universe, for giving that to us.
Right?
Like,
thank you for orgasm.
Yeah, thank you for orgasm.
Goodness.
That was like, no matter how rich you get or poor, we all have access to that. Like, we got to have perspective once in a while. We have access to an orgasm, whether you're single or in a relationship. If you're at the top of the food chain or at the bottom, that's something we all get to have.
And if you don't see the value in orgasm or the grand reward in orgasm, ask yourself if you're having an honest one. Because a lot of us commit to the faking it. A lot of us commit to, I'll go part of the way, but I don't want to go all the way because I'm afraid of what that might look like, what my body might do, what might come out of me.
Is that actually a thing?
Audibly, of course.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah, it's very real.
So there are people that you're saying that they're afraid to let themselves experience the...
You have to surrender to it. Think about that.
Yeah.
It's a moment where you surrender to your own body. You have to say, okay, for the next few minutes or seconds, I agree to be out of control. Because you cannot be in control all the way to orgasm. It's the body releasing control so that you can have this rush and surge of cellular and psychological pleasure that comes through your body. And most people have a fear around letting go in that way.
I know what you're saying is true because oh man. Okay, let's say there are people listening right now where they're there, where they're like, I'm in a relationship. My boyfriend's awesome, but maybe because I had something traumatic in my past or whatever, I can't get myself to let go. I'm embarrassed or whatever. If you don't mind stepping into Dr. Laura Hatt or
totally.
whatever, like, how does somebody
start
taking steps to that? With
self-pleasure. Don't ever begin this journey depending on someone else to get you there and then find yourself going, well, why can't I do it? Why isn't it happening for me? Because you don't even know yourself at this point.
Yeah.
How can you direct somebody towards this thing you want to achieve if you don't know how to get there yourself? It begins with self-pleasure, and it begins with letting go of the goal. You can't say, oh God, it's been 3 minutes. Why have I not experienced this yet? Oh God, it's about making yourself the most comfortable you can be and fully understanding that this is not bad. This is not wrong. Nothing bad is going to come from this. And only until you accept that you are safe can you begin saying, well, what might be pleasure to me? What might feel like pleasure to me? Does it start with me just stroking a part of my body? that feels nice. Well, where else does it feel nice? Because, the sensations of our erogenous zones can be all over the body. These are the areas that activate and spark with that feeling of arousal. They can be in different places for people. Some people like the back of the knee. Some people like, the side body underneath the armpit where all of these delicious lymph nodes live. There's so many areas that we just don't even consider on our physical selves that might be a pleasure conducer. So we don't go there. We're just like, oh my God, I'm pounding on my, my clit. Why isn't anything happening? You're putting a lot of pressure on that one area.
So what's really fascinating is orgasm is obviously this intense thing, but what you're describing to me is a softening.
Yeah.
Like a slow, like getting comfortable, getting safe.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting paradox. So it's actually the softening and the letting go that leads to that. It's not like putting so much pressure.
No,
on
it's
yourself.
it's really funny because you look at some of these individuals that we throughout history have said, that's a sexually liberated person. That's someone who's an incredibly sexually free person. And, just one thing that comes to mind would be the pinup star, American pinup star Betty Page, the classic blunt bangs. She was the model that did a lot of those very kinky, sexy nudes in a time where we didn't really have a lot of pornography or seductive material like that being circulated. And so Betty Page was this pinup model and, very sexually free in that era of her life. It did change. But one of the practices she had, which was a daily practice, was she would open up the windows in her home and walk naked through her home to feel the air move across parts of her body. And then what you're doing is you're actually becoming aware of the sensations all over yourself, the little hairs on our body that pick up the wind, the idea that we are one with the environment to our nakedness. It's just there are practices you can do that begin to introduce your body as a whole as a pleasure receiver.
Yes.
And I mean, that's just one of them. And I've actually done that from time to time. And I find it very useful. Open up all the windows, get naked, and just see what air from the outside world feels like on yourself.
You bring up another thing. The best path to relationship is actually through individual practices first.
Yes.
Because then you learn about yourself and
Yes.
you can try things and then you can bring it into like that relationship dynamic. But
Otherwise, you let them define you. Remember
Yes,
that.
exactly.
Otherwise,
They're like, this is the way it is and
Right.
stuff like that. But there may be things that you would discover on your own.
Yes.
So it's like, do that first and then you can bring it to the play time with somebody else.
And people do figure it out for themselves what they like and what feels good. But then there's that other hurdle of, wait, now I have to communicate it. What if it's
Great.
a little? What if it's a little different?
To me, that's the fun part.
I agree, but
People are afraid of it.
yeah, I mean,
But it is so human and fun to be like to try to have an idea that I have in my head and try to get it to somebody else. Or I mean, that's why I think play is so important in adulthood.
Yeah.
Like you got to keep
we
it
don't.
playful.
We think
don't do
that we
enough.
reserve that solely for the youth.
Yeah.
We say that when you grow up, there's no more playtime.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to play. You're an adult. You have
Yeah.
responsibilities. You're supposed to be accountable for X, Y, and Z. There's no playtime in that world. And that's where a lot of people harden. And my goodness, I think that's where disease comes from.
That I think you're
Believe that shit.
I think you're
I really
onto
do.
something. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm hearing when I'm hearing
Yeah.
you describe finding what feels good, walking in front of the windows naked, like letting the air is like there's a play in that to me.
Yeah.
That's like just being free flowy and trying things without it being so rigid, like this is the way to do something.
I mean, there are a million ways that you can begin doing this. One of an incredible exercise that I learned when I was at the New York School of Burlesque, where I got certified in all kinds of erotic dance form and feeling your most confident, was just the act of putting on a nice slow song that you like and standing up straight and tall and beginning to work an imaginary soap between your hands. And as you're getting the lather going, then you think about pushing the lather around your body. And we did this in burlesque to ensure that we knew all of our body was worthy of presentation and was worthy of sex appeal or whatever the fuck the pursuit was. Because again, especially with a lot of women, they think it's just their tits and ass and that's all they have to offer. And so this action of lathering to music. So you find a sensual connection to something that has a drive and an intention of maybe romancing you or seducing you. As you're moving this around, you realize, oh my God, I feel beautiful. I feel incredible. And I never realized how immaculate this stretch of land is between my hip and my knee. And I never considered this to have a power to it. And these are all the ways that you start accessing your sensual side. And once you activate the sensual side, you feel a little bit more willing to pursue pleasure. You begin to embrace pleasure. And this is why it's never too late. It's not like if you had an upbringing that was of a certain standard or with certain restrictions, it doesn't mean that you're condemned to that forever. You can begin in the smallest efforts to actually activate your sensual self. And my God, it's worth it.
That's what I love about this whole thing.
Yeah.
Is you can take steps
Yeah.
to do it.
Yeah.
By the way, we're in New York City.
Yeah.
So we're gonna probably hear outdoor sounds.
I hear like a vacuum or something.
Is that a vacuum or is what?
A street cleaner.
So it's in the building. Okay. So if you hear a vacuum, then I mean, we're in New York City.
Oh, definitely.
What, jumping forward a little bit on the
Yeah.
timeline, what got you into sex work, like Naked News and stuff like that? And like I'm going to throw just a couple questions. What got you into it to see wherever you want to take it? And did you ever hit into these, I'm a bad person, I'm who am I to do this? Was there like any embarrassment, guilt, any of that stuff in that journey? How the fuck did you overcome any of that stuff? Because even if you don't have a religious upbringing, putting yourself out there at all, like literally to bear all while talking about the news and everything else, it's like ballsy as fuck.
I know.
Like I have so much I'm just going on social media. My clothes are always on.
Yeah.
So far, maybe we'll do
a naked episode.
Yeah, we'll do a naked episode.
Let's do it
somebody's
now.
Okay. I mean, this episode all goes. Yeah. I might have to blur something. For Yeah. So what got you into it? I'll let you take that wherever you want to take it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll fast track all of it for you, right? So I was in New York City studying film. I'm 18 years old, and I'm here for the first time having all kinds of incredible discoveries about myself and life and what rewards me, what I feel good about. I started go-go dancing in the evening because there was an animal inside of me that said, I want to take the stage. I'm go-go dancing in the Lower East Side. Someone taps me on the shoulder, says, you should get into burlesque. My God.
So this is probably your stopping grounds right here.
Yeah. All this East Village shit.
Fuck yeah.
Oh, this is all Lower East Side, East Village. This was where it all began.
Cool.
We're going to go on a little tour later. Good. Yeah, so then I get into burlesque. And this was when I started for the first time actually disrobing in front of audiences and sharing myself in its bare form. I mean, obviously burlesque, you're mostly wearing tassels and a G-string. But Can
I ask you a question?
Yeah.
What was that like the first time? When you're actually bearing your naked body?
It's so funny, the shapes that your body will make when you're apprehensive about what it might look like to others.
Yeah.
And the way that you try to form these silhouettes that we as a culture have decided are sexy. So I remember being in very much a panic of, don't just stand there. Think of Jessica Rabbit. Think of Betty Boop. Think of all of these very known, burned into our mind, agreed as a society as sexy visuals to hit. And it took me a while to shake that shit off and be like, no, I could stand here completely in front of you naked and know that this is absolutely irresistible. That took a minute.
I was just going to say, that must have been a journey to get to that.
100%.
So was it just practice? Was it just doing it? Was it just
It was one of those instances of, when they say do something every day that scares you, do something every day. Well, it did scare me. Yeah. But I also felt amazing after doing it.
Isn't that funny?
Right.
The thing that scares you is actually where you get some sense of
I
liberation.
Still feel it. Yeah. I still feel it if I'm about to take my clothes off in front of an audience. I still feel it. But it's the aftermath reward. And I have never been told, well, that was a waste of my time and you're disgusting. And again, that's probably a privilege. It is a privilege because I know other people that may have attempted to share themselves and have been met with rejection. So I acknowledge that it's a fucking privilege that I've never had someone come up to me and go, you know what? I wish you didn't do that. Because I found celebration every time I did it. yes, applause from an audience, but I also found a community that I had never known existed before. And it was other people that said, yeah, doesn't it feel good?
Yeah.
Doesn't it feel good to do this? Doesn't it feel good to let our sensual authenticity out as opposed to caging it in? And I got excited and I started building all these different acts, and I wanted to be a little bit more aggressive and hard hitting in one of them. And that's, again, part of my sexual self. I have these sides to me, this duality, you know? And so sometimes I want to be soft and balletic and very beautiful. And sometimes I want to be a little bit harder and crazier and try some things. So I just kept doing it. And I realized, oh my God, am I figuring myself out? This is amazing. I am all of these things. I am such an incredibly diverse human being.
That's the part that I think is so cool about this whole thing.
Right.
Is you have in yourself so many layers.
Yeah. I mean, we do as humans. People do not understand that for themselves. They don't even want to begin discovering them. They don't know how to. They don't know that there's a benefit in it. To them, it's like, what if I find something I don't like? What if I find something I can't accept? What if I find something that's irreversible and I'm stuck with it? And it's really, it scares me. It's different than what other people have inside of them. Of course it is, because we all have things that are different from what other people. It's called your individuality. So I'm doing burlesque in Toronto for about 10 years, and I've toured Europe twice as a solo performer. I've, emceed festivals around the world. I've begun getting on the microphone, and I'm singing and stripping and dancing, and I've had an amazing run doing this.
And this is like your primary source of income.
Yeah, this was it. I was living off of.
How fucking cool.
Oh my God. I mean, it's a hustle. It's a
hustle,
grind.
for sure.
It's a grind, and you have to do a lot of it.
But that's actually what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like, good for fucking, like, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Like, way to.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
Anybody that's, I consider that very entrepreneurial.
It very much is. And again, that's why I just applaud anyone who's making a living that way. I go, oh my God, it takes some tough fucking titties to do that.
Yeah.
Because, you've got to be pushing yourself, not just physically, but creatively. And that can be such a conflict, right? I'm exhausted, but I need to think of something creative. I'm, burnt out, but they need a new act, all of that. But, I'm having this streak of wild creativity. I'm sharing myself in this new and exciting way. And I get an email saying, hey, would you like to teach burlesque on Naked News? We've got a couple of other segments within the show where sometimes the cast do some fun, silly things, like learn a new dance style. And they said, do you want to come in and teach burlesque?
But you were living in New York.
I was living in Toronto at this point.
Gotcha.
I went back to Toronto, and I was, creating shows for stages, burlesque and erotic theater. So I started exploring more of sexual performances, not just sensual, not just alluding to, but actually bringing nudity into it and actually bringing some light penetrative art into it. So I was putting live performances together all over Toronto at this point. I get the email.
We all need to recharge once in a while.
What did you say? You were talking
How did that?
Did somebody say Siri somewhere?
Wait, technology has a compassion? Did you hear that?
We're keeping this in. What is?
Honey, you are not in this podcast today.
This is between Laura and I.
That is so funny.
It's so funny because the whole podcast started with you saying something about needing to be nice to technology.
And look what happened.
And then it was actually Siri this time, not Alexa, that was like, that's a.
My God.
The fuck?
What is going on?
Anyway, I think she agrees with you. So you need a recharge.
Thank you for
sometimes
that.
It's a hustle.
Dr. Siri.
Exactly.
She's going to come back again.
Yeah.
Careful.
Yeah.
So I started, I did a little one-off with the ladies at Naked News, and we had a ball. But, of course, the producer and the rest of the team there, the writers, everyone was like, wow, like, she's a lot of fun. She speaks really well, and wow, she's kind of good at this, you think. I mean, I'd only been spending how many years standing on stages, speaking to audiences, and they said, is this something you might want to try an audition for? And I said, of course I do. So I stood on that green screen and I read the teleprompter, no problem. And after that, it was right in. I'm writing, I'm producing, I'm presenting, I'm traveling. It became a whirlwind.
How long did you do that? 'Cause
7.5 years.
7.5 years.
Yeah.
What was the best part?
Leading my own investigations. So I would say, I got to create my own content. I would say to my producer, hey, guess what? I really love dirty talk. I'm really fucking good at it. Can I do a series about dirty talk? And he'd say, yeah, sure. And I say, great. I'm going to interview X, Y, and Z.
You have the great voice for it.
Yeah, I
like,
know.
when we're DMing, like, by the way, how do you say your name? And you're like, you have to breathe in. You're like, Laura Desiree.
That's
how did I
right.
do? Let's hear. How did you say your name?
Okay, I'll tell you why I said it the way I did, though. I did send a voice note on how to say my name. And that was a direct tribute to a very famous movie scene where Lauren Bacall says to Humphrey Bogart in To Have and Have Not, a great old film, she says, you know how to whistle, don't you? You just put your lips together and blow. And that line was so provocative. And I remember seeing that movie as a young person, and I was obsessed with the idea that a single line and a certain delivery can send that much into it. So, of course, I'm going to say to you, my name? Well, you take a big breath in and you say, Laura Desiree. Like, duh.
Have you done any sort of voiceover stuff besides Naked News?
I've recorded my own eroticas.
Okay.
I've done, I mean, obviously podcasting, but I would love to do more. Are you kidding?
Okay. If I, like, we'll talk
Yeah.
offline. Like, yeah, you have a talent there.
Yeah, no,
for sure.
I love it. And I know that even in our world of, tech and development and CGI, and I know that there's still power in having someone's voice enter you.
Yeah. So I don't know if this is going to take things too dark, but so you've been in this world a lot, and this is a black box for a lot of people. It's a mystery.
Yeah.
Sex is a mystery and stuff like that. And then there's all this stuff around the dark side of sex, let's say. Obviously, there are people that have taken advantage of other people. Like, thank goodness we've had some exposing things like the whole Me Too movement and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Where do you think that comes from? Humans are messy animals. I have some thoughts of like, I think there's some pieces of like, I think shame can lead to act outs in unhealthy ways and that sort of thing. So what's some of the dark side of this thing? Where do you think it comes from, and how do we move past some of the darker stuff? That's a big philosophical question.
That's massive. That's like more than anything Miss America has ever been asked, or Miss Universe.
Yes.
Like what's the answer to world peace?
Yeah.
I think this is the question we're talking about here. I mean, we as a country, America, is rooted, anchored so devoutly in our puritanical beliefs. I mean, the church is not just the word of God. It's become the way we set our rules, the way we set our morals, the way we condition our culture to know what's good and bad. And you look at the biggest evil in puritanical philosophies of any kind, it's always sex.
Totally.
It's always. And
Dude.
then we have such a breakdown of punishments for anything in the sexual realm, whether it's doing it, whether it's talking about it, whether it's fucking thinking about it.
Yep.
And that is so ingrained, even generations later, even generations that don't have attachments to religion today, like myself, I still have to ask myself, and had to, especially during those early years of revealing, is this okay?
Yeah.
That's real. That's a real thing. I mean, that's what America is.
Is this good? Is it bad?
Right.
Is it immoral? That
Right.
whole conversation.
Am I heading down a good path or a dangerous path?
Yeah.
Because unfortunately, when you bear yourself a certain way in this culture, you commit to it.
What's the anchor? Like, how do you know if you've slipped, gone too far, whatever the fuck that means, versus I'm in a healthy place versus a dangerous place?
Well, I remember what my life felt like before I had this outlet. I remember what my options for self-expression felt like. I remember how limited I felt as a human before I took this leap of saying, you know what? I don't have any qualms with being a naked person and you looking at it. I don't have any qualms with expressing myself sexually. When I started permitting that into my life, which was really an acceptance of self.
A gift to yourself.
My God, I
as well.
stood up straighter. My God, I had more incredible connections with human beings, even platonic
Totally.
friendships.
Yep.
I found that I was able to enjoy music more, movies more, life, travel, experiencing the rest of the world, all of that became a greater, intense swell of euphoria because I'm not resisting it. I'm not resisting that, oh, I'm at this art gallery and I'm looking at this half-naked bust of a woman and, wow, that's really hot. And instead of saying, no, don't think like that. Don't think like that. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. Instead, I say, wow, yeah, her nipples are erect. Oof, I like when I feel like that. In fact, I might even slip a hand under. And you know what I mean? Like when you're able to permit yourself, yes, that playfulness, but just that sensual side of yourself.
Yeah.
My good. And was that just like advocating for public masturbation? Because I am not. Like, listen, you're going to be in trouble for doing that.
But just hide yourself.
A slight graze of my nipple. That's not. I'm not masturbating. I'm simply saying pleasure. I know you're there. I know you're there, and I feel you. And then I'm letting go. Okay, I'm not forcing people to bear witness to my explosive orgasm. Because, honey, it rattles the walls, honey.
Not judging that either. Yeah. So
what is this book you brought out? What is this?
That's the deep dive.
Yeah, because I started talking some shit and like you bringing out the big book. I'm like, whoa.
No, those are just some of my
good.
My questions that we're gonna wrap on, but we're not quite there yet. So, but going back to this, there's this whole view on anybody that is free sexually as like this, almost like a loss of something, like they're a loss of like innocent, like this might be a strange thing to say, but this conversation, you feel innocent in a good way. Like there's this, I don't know how to put it into words, but it's not like there's like this, you're like broken or you're used, this strange view if you explore yourself in this way. And that's kind of how I thought I was going to experience when I left the religion, like experience people that have had sex before already and stuff. When I met them, they weren't virgins or whatever. And it's been quite the different experience than what I expected. And so there's this whole view around it being wrong or bad. And I'm just wondering, where does that come from? Is it because of it's just sex is intimidating? Like, I don't even know how to ask the question.
I know what you're asking.
Okay.
I know what you're asking. It transcends what your religious beliefs are. There's an actual answer to this that goes beyond all of that. We're talking about the most vulnerable thing you can do. Pursue pleasure. I mean, to the degree of whether it's attaining orgasm. Pursuing pleasure means you're going to a vulnerable place.
Yeah.
You have to drop your guard to go there. And vulnerability is so intimidating. It's so intimidating to reveal ourselves that way, whether to another person or even to ourselves. The idea that we have to admit we have a range of emotions. We don't just have a solid invincibility. We have a range of reactions to our feelings. Vulnerability is something that people will avoid at all cost. So sex and sexuality being an embrace of all our vulnerability makes people deter from it. Also, I don't know what everyone's introduction to sex is in this world. We don't know what home felt like for them as a young person in the era of self-discovery, in the era of development. This is another thing that we just don't, when we don't understand someone else, it's likely a big reason is that we don't know what they come from. We don't know how they learned the world. The rules of the world are established, in those early years. And
on that note, I think where I'm going with that is usually people would look at somebody like you and think the only reason you're in this space of burlesque and naked news is because you must be fundamentally broken. You had something that bad happened.
Right.
But you're using it as literally a self-discovery tool.
It's the only option I found in life where I could bring my whole self, my emotions, my mess, my chaotic energy, because I did not feel that was an option because of the terms of play that we had as a family. And again, it's not me saying it was right, it was wrong. It's what we did to survive.
Yeah.
But I did not feel that I had a place where I could be authentic and potentially misunderstood, potentially a mess. And sex and sexuality granted me that. Mind you, like I remember trying to have the sex talk as a kid. I remember when my mom was still alive even, and I was not this person then. I was not like, tell me about it. Great, I'm ready to learn. No, I remember running at top speed as fast as possible away from my parents. My sister and I ran. They took us to a baseball diamond and had a Dairy Queen ice cream, and they said, we're going to talk about sex today. Do you girls know what that is? And I remember my sister and I just fucking ran as fast as we could because there was so much that my family wasn't talking to each other about because, my mom was bald at this time going through chemo and we could see she was sick. And I'm like, I knew instinctually in my body, you want to talk about something vulnerable? We don't do that. So we ran.
You were acting out the conditions already that you were modeled.
Yes. We were like, get the fuck out of here. And the way that conversation actually eventually happened was we were on a road trip and it was just my father. And I remember him power locking all the doors in the car as we were on I swear to God, they all went down one by one. It was like, lock, 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 lock. And
we're going to have a conversation there, girls.
Do you girls know if you're interested in using pads or tampons? And I was like, oh my God, we're doing this. We're doing the talk. We're doing the talk. I can't escape. The windows won't go down. We're locked in. The car's moving. Because that's what it eventually took, Vulnerability is scary.
It is. And so I guess what we do then is we try to control it in some way. And then we have these rules. I'm glad that you grew up the way you did, where you had like parents that were somewhat free. One of my previous guests, Chrissy, the way we grew up, like even self-pleasure was truly like sinned, like frowned upon. Like you can't do this. You literally you have to sit in a meeting with an old white dude and confess that you did this thing that is wrong.
Or you thought about this thing? What about the mind? The mind control. That's the most dangerous of all is when you try to attack someone's free thought. Give me a break.
This is why I love having this conversation because growing up that way and seeing like, oh, if you're a woman feeling your clit, like that's horrible. If you're a guy, like having any sort of like self-pleasure, like you can't do that. And then seeing how so fucking human it is, how it's just part of this life to explore all the dimensions that make a human and how normal it is and how it's shut down. That's the shame to me.
Oh, it's
because right now, like there's all these things like in Utah, there's this big saying, porn kills love and stuff like that. And I'm sure you can go overboard on anything. But to me, it's actually the shunning of these very human things that cause the dysfunction in any way.
I mean, shunning, that's the word for it.
Yeah.
That's the word for it. It's the shunning of these most natural fucking realities in our world. I'm sorry. Fight me on it. Sexuality and the pursuit of pleasure is fucking human. That's what makes us different than any other species on this planet. The fact that we are self-aware. The fact that I look into a reflective surface and I go, that's Laura. Is she happy today? Is she sad today? What is that? Other animals don't do that. They might notice another animal, but they don't stop in a mirror. I mean, we've seen the memes and videos of like viral videos of dogs going, what is that? But they're not sitting contemplating, am I happy? But we do that. Yeah. So what are we supposed to do with that? We're supposed to explore it. We're supposed to find reasons or solutions for being happier, for being more pleasured. No other fucking life force on this planet does that.
And I think the key point that I really want to bring it up is they're probably, because it is so human, I know for a fact that humans have this instinct to explore it.
Yeah.
But then they are been told their whole life that it's wrong.
Well, yeah.
So they shut it down.
Because think about it. I think that we also see ourselves and go, well, I don't want others to see me as anything other than perfect. Okay, we're going to deny that side of ourselves. Yeah. Because for a second, I saw my face with some dirt on it, and that dirt was called I masturbated. That dirt is called I thought about sex.
And so I just want to make it so fucking loud and clear. It's okay. It's fucking okay. Like whatever you want to explore in yourself and in this realm, okay. You're human. You're not a bad person. Like I feel like I'm talking to my younger self right now as I say that. Yeah. Like this is okay. This is you. This is normal. Even though anyone around you, your culture, your upbringing, your mom, your dad, it, like society, it feels wrong. Like it's you, it's human, and it's okay to, using your word, explore. Have that internal exploration of your own pleasure and what you're into.
Just start small.
Yeah.
With yourself. Just start in the smallest investigation. I swear to God, the sense of touch of your own self. Done. You know what I mean? It begins there.
Okay. We're going to start going to the, what I'm calling end on the deep end.
It literally says end on the deep end.
Yeah.
Woo!
It may not. And it might even, it could be something related to this or totally different. So if I caught right, I think you said you're like 34, which is, like a lot of people are afraid to say how old they are.
No.
And the start of this was actually like, I wanted to get a sense of how old you are. So, because,
Check.
So you've lived some life.
Yeah.
So if you look back on your teenage years, what are you most proud of that version of Laura? Just curious about your teenage decade or your beginning of exploration. What are you most proud of?
Of exploration. Don't
With
you dare
that
say
version.
expiration. What is she we sending her out to pasture?
Exploration. What are you,
You know
most proud
what?
of about the teenage version of Laura?
As cringy as it is, and I mean, I can't even look at the pictures of teenage Laura. As cringy as it was that she had piercings all in her face, she had crazy colored hair, sometimes buzzed in places, cut with kitchen scissors. She was a mess of eyeliner and acne and sweat and probably some stink. She wore that every day. She did that every single day. She presented herself that way every single day, knowing she has a twin that looks exactly like her, that didn't look like that, knowing that people are going to compare the two of you, knowing that there's an expectation on young women to look and behave a certain way. I am so fucking proud that in those teenage years, no matter how much I go, ugh, when I look at some of the decisions in wardrobe and aesthetics, I still say, you know what? That's fucking impressive. That's impressive that she did that. She had holes in her face and she had eyeliner out to her eyebrows and she cut all these weird parts in her hair and she did it every single day.
She was willing to be different, even though she was going to have pressure from the outside world too.
Yeah.
Fuck yeah.
Fuck
I'm proud of that too.
Yeah, fuck yeah, right?
Okay.
Yeah. I'll send you a picture. We can throw that one up on the episode.
Okay, that sounds great.
Because there's a really rough one that I laugh at now.
Okay, when you were in your 20s then.
Yeah.
What in you built if you reflect back on your 20s, what is something you did early 20s, mid 20s or whatever that you developed the most self-respect? Like what did you do or what was a decision you made that you're like, I respect the fuck out of her for that?
This is going to be perhaps unorthodox. But I put miles on my mattress. I engaged in multiple, diverse, exploratory, impulsive acts of sex and sexuality and seeing what felt like what. And having the fucking bravery and the self-respect to do that and develop a vocabulary around boundaries and develop a vocabulary around what the fuck brings me pleasure. I mean, I lost a lot of years of maybe hitting the books and really grinding career goals and really knocking down people's doors to make sure that my earnings were up. But I know exactly what I want when it comes to the pleasure I'm looking for. And it changes day to day, but I have a vocabulary for it because I took chances. And yes, I learned hard lessons and I learned fucking phenomenal lessons, but I did that. And I went into those encounters and I'm proud because I've seen what happens when people don't. And it can be a very different life. And I don't think that all is lost for folks that didn't have that time in their life, but I do think it's important to find an opportunity to have some, call it disposable sexual experiences, where it's not tied exclusively to the love of my life and I am going to depend on everything from this person, including all the pleasure I could ever want in the world.
So much pressure.
It's a lot of pressure. And I think that it's important to have experiences ranging in pressures we put on ourselves, including the most disposable, for the fuck of it, good time.
Man, that is such a refreshing thing to feel free on. Yes, you want to do what's best for you in the long run and stuff like that, but just give yourself the freedom to, I mean, going back to the word exploration, being free to be like, this is a short term, probably will never do this again, but you're going to learn something. It's going to be an experience that you can take.
Listen, I remember when I left my very first one night stand ever in life. I was in Brooklyn, and I must have been 19, and he was a long-haired, sexy rock and roll player, 5 years older than me, 4 years older than me. And we had this night where I just said, I'm going to say yes to things. And I wasn't blackout drunk or unable to consent. I was able to consent. And I said excitedly, my God, I think I'm going to go home with this person. Why not? Let's see what happens. And I remember having this beautiful night where I was entirely myself, and I was just so excited and insatiable. And it's not about the night. It's about the next morning. I remember I left him asleep in the bed, and I put on my headphones, and I had my little iPod Shuffle or whatever it was back then. And I remember I turned on a song, a Rolling Stones song called Rocks Off. And the intro to that song, which people will all be listening to after this, it's so fucking badass. And there's a line in it where he says, I was making love last night to a dancer friend of mine. None of that What matters is the way the sunlight hit me. As I'm walking out of this dude's house, I was so thrilled with myself. I remember getting on the subway, knowing I hadn't had a shower yet, hoping that everyone could smell it on me that I had sex last night.
Not walk of shame, walk of fucking celebration. Stride of pride, baby.
I remember being like, looking at everyone around me like, can you believe it? I had sex with someone I might never see again last night.
Oh, man.
Me. And you know what? I'm like rolling out my neck on the subway like, wow. It was like so ridiculous peacocking moment, but it felt that good.
I relate to you so much you have no idea.
Really? You had one of those?
Yes. I'm not going to share the whole story, but I call it my first chosen sex experience because the way I was raised, I had like a church assigned marriage. I'm like no longer married because she's in the religion I left. Great person, all good things. But when I had chosen sex for the first time, I was like, holy shit, I did that. And I feel great about that. And I'm still here. Like, I was like, I wasn't destroyed. Yeah. This is wild.
Yes.
My assistant, Nora, is like dying laughing because she knows. Yeah. And it was just like, it was like, I learned so many things from that. I learned, wait a minute, women like sex as much as I do?
Yes.
That's amazing. You know,
this is exactly it.
Yeah, it was so liberating.
Eureka.
In so many ways. So that's a long story for another time.
I hope you record that for everybody.
I will.
Yeah, they're going to need that.
Yeah, that's why I'm like, bringing in more of these types of conversations to make this normal because again, and there's a lot of conversation there. Like there's very few sex conversations. There's some, and then there's many podcasts where it's just women talking. And I'm like, I don't have a lot. There's not a lot of just dudes talking.
You've also got a very, very unique story that I think is very important to tell. I could say that about every single human being on earth, and I will. But your experience in particular, we're talking about huge extremes. We're talking about massive contrast. We're talking about a fight for your fucking life.
Yeah. You know? And that's what I relate. If we hung out after this, like there's so many things in your whole exploration that I find fascinating because it's so different and yet I still connect to it. Like the finding yourself, being different from however everybody else taught you to, becoming okay and accepting that this is who you are, making that okay to explore that and accept all grades of yourself, the wild, the messy. There's so many people I see women do this and it breaks my heart where they're like, I'm worried about being too much. Fuck that shit. Be all of you.
I mean, I've certainly questioned myself in a number of eras.
Of course you have.
And I've certainly been told a number of times in my life, like, you're a lot. It's really intense. Like, you're really intense. And I'm like, that's a you thing.
It exactly
that's a you
is.
thing.
Yeah, don't change it. Yeah. It's so refreshing.
Yeah.
Like, just like soul to soul. like
I feel you soul
yeah,
to soul.
I'm so-
I feel you soul to soul.
Yeah, it feels so good to have somebody that's like open to explore that way.
Good.
Okay. For the last, so we did the 20s, the self-respect thing. You put miles on your mattress. I love that phrase.
Yeah.
I'm learning
Yeah.
more today.
Yeah.
If you reflect on life now or the last few years, but now and looking ahead, if you could sum it up, what's been one of your favorite things about life? Like that's like, it can be anything, but I mean, we're on this fucking floating rock in space. We're all trying to figure out what the fuck we're doing here. And like, there's some things that we found, you know, people find purpose and pleasure and experience and presence and all that. But what's been in your long experience life? Because by the way, you've put miles on your mattress, but you've put miles in life.
Yeah.
Like you've experienced shit. And
Yeah.
that's my thing is like, it's not about the years. It's about the depth.
Yeah.
Like, what are you doing in that time? And it actually, to me, that's what makes you stay young is like having those experiences. So
Listen,
you've lived.
it's going to fuel us for the rest of our lives.
Yeah. So
These memories and moments that we make happen right now, the presence that we honor in a moment, like you want the details.
yeah.
So be there for them.
Yeah.
So sink into them. What excites me now is reinvention. The opportunity that I can wake up one day, change something. I mean, in the simplest, most aesthetic driven way. Like the other day, I don't want eyebrows anymore. Boom, gun, gonna bleach them out. No more eyebrows. I want to be an alien, you know, and I can do that. Or I can say, you know what, I really want to explore a little bit more of this side of my career or my artistry. You know, I still do some performances, yes, at NSFW, yes, at a number of different clubs. I like having a place to play, and I like having the option for reinvention. And I think that people they think, oh, well, I used to be this person. They don't realize we are reinventing constantly in our life. Yeah. We are constantly reestablishing ourselves, putting a little bit more of this ingredient in the mix, stirring it, letting it simmer a little bit longer here. Like we are constantly reinventing, and people think, oh, well, reinvention is saved for like Madonna or a pop star, or someone that comes back with a whole new look. It's not just about that.
I also think in a strange way, I think some people look at it as like a defeat almost, like they should have had it figured out already.
Yeah, that's a big one though.
Yeah.
We pressure ourselves immensely on that. You know, I was supposed to meet this mark 10 years ago. Why haven't I done it yet? I was supposed to be that person 5 years ago. And now I'm the person that I was dreaming of being when I was a kid. Is it everything it was meant to be? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Reinvention is available to all of us. You will get excited about life again.
And I relate to that one, you know, like growing up in a small town in Utah and now living in fucking New York City.
You are the fucking definition of reinvention, my friend.
It's been a wild ride and it's just getting started and I'm so excited for that.
Likewise.
Different layers of yourself. Okay, so we're going to come in for a landing. We'll come up with like any final takeaways for people listening. And I just have to say, so you know how you have different parts of yourself and sometimes you have both of them at the same time. Like you're confident, but also like
I'm terrified
at the same time. I just have to say with you, I've had this whole conversation because there's a piece of me. It's like, this is normal. It's just another conversation. But there's this other side of me that's like the 15-year-old me. If he's like, you're like somebody that you could be searching naked news on fucking Pornhub.
Yeah.
And now you're like like that's just part of your life now. Like it's bananas.
The best thing about today is that you just said that. I don't know how you did, but like 99.9% of the world would just keep that to themselves. They'd be like, oh, I'm not going to share this little.
I was just noticing that. I just had both of those. I'm
good.
Like, this
I'm
is normal.
so happy you said that.
Yeah.
I'm so happy you said that.
Cool. Yeah.
See,
cool.
that's how you start to begin the vulnerability. Yeah. What you're talking about is a little bit of a vulnerability. And I like that shit. Good on you.
Yeah.
Good on you.
I mean, it is. It's like, this is just.
It makes us human. It makes this setting so comfortable.
Yeah.
Right? Like.
That's where you create safe spaces, is like somebody being willing to like reveal something about themselves, like show something that's true and real.
Yeah.
On that note, maybe that's a good thing to ask on or to end on. What is something that, like, if people want to start exploring their vulnerable side, because I think a big part of this whole conversation around sexuality is really about honesty, interestingly enough. Like being true to, what do I want to feel? What do I want to explore? This is, if I'm being honest, I kind of do that, and that feels good, or I want to try that. Like, where do you start? If you
there's a lot of wonderful, I mean, this is so like armchair psychologist, but like journaling is a big one. But if we're going to attach this to, say, the great place to start within sensual exploration, because we know that's my brand, this might be weird to people, but I implore you to describe the porn you've been watching in a written statement, to describe it, including describing the point that got you off. It's just for yourself. It's not for anyone else to read. It's not, exactly. It's not for anyone else to read. You don't need to be like, I watched Riley Reid finger bang, blah, blah. It's not what it's, I'm saying, tell me what happened in it. Tell me the story of that, because I know most of us are watching porn, and that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. I think that that's more common than our own mental imagining and doing masturbation without some kind of visual stimulation. So for people that are thinking, how the hell do I break this cycle and maybe make more out of this desire to be sensual, start writing the story of what you just watched and begin to describe how it made you feel. I dare you. As you're writing that, begin to talk to us about how your body signaled, oh God, we're on the way to orgasm. What are the alarms that go off in your body? What are they? What do you begin? And if you don't have words for this, it's not about writing complete sentences. Get fucking weird with it. Get rid of the structure. Put down descriptive words. This might be completely bonkers to folks.
Don't give Calvin a dare.
Yeah.
He will do the dare.
You need to do it.
I will do it.
Yeah, you need to do it.
I'm fucking doing that.
You need to do it.
That sounds it. And I love writing already and journaling.
Yeah,
and
yeah. But I
that's
think
something
that
I've not done.
It's just like establishing that safe correspondence with yourself. And I say write it because then it becomes more real to you than just thinking it and circling it and potentially heading into a downward spiral of dwell. Writing it is something that makes it a piece of documentation you can reflect back on, something you can return to contemplate later, but also a contract with yourself saying, I'm committing to these thoughts. I'm not going to...
And I'm not shaming it. Yeah.
It's not for anyone else but yourself. But put pen to paper and just start describing what was it that got you off in that last video.
That's so
you
good.
watched.
There's such an acceptance in that.
Yeah.
Like that this was real. This is, and instead of being like, I'm doing this and it's like this shady thing. It's like, no, I did this, and you're actually like just being with it and making it okay.
You're also teaching yourself to take inventory of what it is that brings you pleasure.
Yeah.
Which I think
there's a self-awareness to it.
It's essential. Yeah. Awesome.
YouTube channel.
Yeah. Check out my YouTube channel, everybody. I've got an amazing series that's demystifying all the stigma in sex work, because let me tell you, it's bullshit. It's called Red Umbrella Talk. You can find it on my channel, Laura X Desiree. That's also my social media handle everywhere. So
Laura X Desiree everywhere. Red Umbrella Talk. Let's see what you did there.
That's
Good
right.
job. And even though you're no longer with Naked News, there's still plenty. Like just search.
It's all
Laura,
in the archives.
Naked News. It's all there.
In the archives, nakednews.com. You can find my entire career there.
So time just flew. I feel like we could have gone longer.
We'll do another one. Don't worry.
Totally down to do another one.
Yeah, we're going to do another one.
Love. What a great thing to... I didn't notice that till just now.
People wait to see if hate's on the other hand, and I go, absolutely not. It's just love. It's just love with that one.
I'm going to let you say the final word if you want. What's the final word as we cut off?
The final word of the day is love. And that might sound basic or entry level, but contemplate it in all of its complexities, transformations, and the attachments it has in your life. Love. What does it mean to you?
Fuck yeah.
Hell yeah.
Okay. Bada bing, bada boom.
Bada boom, bada bang,
That's it.
right?
That's the episode. Thanks so much for watching.
Thank you.
Subscribe, do all the things. Yay. And thank you so much for coming to the studio.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Okay. That's it. Hey, Calvin here. Thank you so much for watching or listening. Wherever you watched or listened, whether that was on Spotify or YouTube, please do me a solid and subscribe. This right here, this video, this podcast is a dream. It's one crazy ex-cult kid's dream to make this more of a full-time thing. So if you comment or subscribe, any feedback, it shows the algorithm that this is more content that should be out there. So thank you for getting to the end here. Thank you for subscribing, and I will see you on the next episode.